welcome to today's episode. I'm Justin Weiser, calling out of Carmel, Indiana. Grew up in Carmel. I was actually born in Baltimore, moved out here in 5th grade from North Carolina. Happy to be here with you today. Joining me today, we have Michael Daniels, my friend and colleague from the e-discovery information governance cybersecurity section with IndyBar Association. Michael, glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Great to be here.
Michael has received some great news. He's been admitted to the Indiana bar through passage of the bar exam.
Yep.
I kind of muffed that up a little bit, Michael.
That's all right. Yeah,
Michael received some great news. He passed the bar examination for Indiana.
Yeah.
Congratulations, counselor.
Thank you so much. Glad to be able to practice with you and some of the great folks in the Indianapolis law community.
Talk about great timing, man. In crazy times, you got some great news. So congratulations. Mazel tov.
Thank you.
We could all use some good news these days.
That's right.
Absolutely. Welcome, Max.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us from the East Coast. Max's father is my mother's brother.
Yeah.
Shout out to Uncle Yale and James and family.
Shouts out.
Max, welcome to the episode today. We're grateful to have you. We're in this environment of COVID-19, and through the work that you do, you train people to be successful in a virtual environment. Mm-hmm. And we are all facing this remote work location challenge. And so I thought you have such a great perspective because every day you are training folks to become savvy with technology and successful for work, whether it's remote or in person. So we really value your time and thought you could maybe just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I work at a company called HubSpot. HubSpot is basically a CRM platform with sales, marketing, and service software built into it. It integrates with a ton of other tools out there. It's awesome, right? And so the whole idea of HubSpot is that it's this piece of software that supports this thing called the inbound methodology. And the inbound methodology is basically a way of attracting, engaging, and delighting prospects and customers at your business. So there's this very interesting combination of this like theory and strategy with this piece of software that's purpose-built to like support it. That's HubSpot in a nutshell. So what I do is I train all of the new hires that come to HubSpot along with my team, right? So there's about 4 or 5 other trainers, or actually, no, there's 3 other trainers that do the exact same thing that I do. My colleague Jill Noonan here in Cambridge, as well as Sean Allman and Brenda Ting. They're out in Singapore and Dublin, and they do the same exact job that I do. But basically, we're the ones that welcome new HubSpotters to HubSpot as a company, and we train them all about this thing called the inbound methodology, as well as teach them how to actually use our software. We introduce them to our company, how we make money, who our customers are, and our culture. So it's about a 7-ish day training and onboarding program. Historically, it's all taken place on site. So we run these trainings in our Cambridge office, in our Dublin office, in our Singapore office. But obviously with COVID-19, that, mixed things up very quickly. And we had to, within a matter of like 3 days, essentially, take our historically on-premise onboarding and training program, which is very intense, and turn it into a fully remote inclusive one. So there was a lot of stuff that we learned from that experience. And, I've always been comfortable doing, virtual instructor-led training because in my previous roles at HubSpot, I was doing something similar, only it was more customer facing. But it's definitely been a bit of a journey, like taking our program and completely figuring out how to do it remotely. I know a lot of you folks out there are kind of going through the same thing right now. And a lot of folks out there may be learning remotely for the first time, and that's a challenge in and of itself. So hopefully today, Justin and Mike, I can help answer any questions that you guys have, and we can steer everybody in a good direction. So if we get started with Zoom real quick, right? there's like a lot of different like interactivity tools that like you can use in Zoom to just make things a lot more interactive with your audience, right? So I'll say this from like the perspective of someone who's like training someone, right? For me, you know, I'm somebody who feeds off the audience of, or the energy of the audience in the classroom, right? So flipping that whole scenario and moving to a place where I'm just sitting in front of a computer alone in my office or on the beach as I am right now, that's been a big shift for me. But on top of that, if you think about learners, like being in a classroom is like an experience, and there's something about like being there like with your team and with everybody else and learning together that fosters a lot of, you know, knowledge transfer. Okay. And what sucks is when you go remote like this is a lot of that just human interaction element that like boosts a lot of the learning and boosts the whole classroom experience completely goes away. So you have to find ways to make it as like interactive as possible, right? So in terms of something like Zoom, a couple of things that I'll recommend that everybody does, and whether you're, you know, an individual learner or you're a someone who's training someone in a class setting, right? Couple of things you always want to do. Like first, make sure everyone knows how to mute, everyone knows how to stop video. If I'm dealing with a smaller class or a smaller group, I'll typically say, hey, everybody get off mute unless you have some crazy noise going on in the background. I'll tell everyone to, hey, turn your video on just so I know you're here. I know there's a lot of stuff going on outside of, you know, this training. So like if you have to step away, turn your video off. That way I know you're like you're present or not present. And that's a whole nother discussion about how today's online learners are totally different than the ones in the past. But there's like three big things with Zoom specifically from the tech side that can really help like boost interactivity and mix things up a little bit and keep it more interesting when you're using Zoom. So a couple of things besides like basic screen sharing. First one is polls, right? So polls is a feature that you can turn on, and it allows people to basically answer a question that you pose, and the whole group can either answer it anonymously or you can set it up so like you can see what people voted for. A good example of where I use that is whenever I'm doing, you know, a long day of training, I will generally throw a poll in there that says like, hey, is anybody overwhelmed, underwhelmed, or just whelmed, right? And it's like a goofy little way of asking that question, but it's great for me as the facilitator because I'm able to kind of gauge, you know, how am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? Are we going at a good clip? And it lets me kind of like adjust the way the day's going. And it's great for the learners too, because they don't feel like they're just watching a TV show. They're actually interacting and they have a stake or a hand in like how the day actually goes and how the content unfolds. So polls are great. The other thing that's good too is annotation. So whenever you're sharing your screen, you can have people actually draw stuff or stamp stuff or type stuff on the screen. Now, where that's helpful for someone like a facilitator, so if we think of someone like, you know, teaching law students or teaching some sort of law course, right? If you have sort of slide decks that you're using where like you're posing a question to someone, right? Oftentimes what I would do as a facilitator is like, I love having, you know, slides that just show an open-ended question, and I try to like get people to talk because I like to have my sessions be more of a conversation than me just like saying stuff. But what you can do with annotation now is like you can pose that question on a Google slide, and then you can say, hey, everybody go use the annotate feature and type what you think the answer is. So they're writing directly on the screen versus just in the chat. So sometimes that's a little funner than just saying throw your answer in the chat itself. But then like, you know, you can do other stuff, right? Where you can like pose a multiple choice question, have people circle stuff or stamp stuff, or have like a map and say, point to where you think this thing is. There's a lot of different things you can do with annotation, and it makes it that much more interactive. The last big thing, and this is huge if you're someone like teaching a class or, you know, anything like that, where you have a larger audience. We use a lot of team challenges at HubSpot, and team challenges are basically times where we can get the class people together and have them work on something. So like if you have any projects and any law courses that you're doing or whatever it may be, and you want to get people to huddle together and talk about, you know, how they'd work through a certain project that you have, breakout rooms are a really great feature. What a breakout room lets you do is it lets you put together a bunch of different Zoom attendees and throw them into their own individual room, and they can work together without having to be in the main large group. So if you have large group classes, that's definitely a great thing to do. Now, A couple other things, right? The other big thing too is make sure people know how to bring up the participants window. So if you guys look at the bottom of your screen, it says manage participants. If you click on that, what you'll notice is that I have a couple of things here that say like, yes, no, there's a hand raise feature, go slower, go faster. So what I'll tell people to do is like, hey, if you have a question, hit the hand raise button. That way I can see if you have a question, right? Smaller classes, if you're comfortable with it, I just tend to say, hey, interrupt me whenever you need to. When it's a larger class and you're trying to, you know, manage the amount of talking that's going back and forth, having people on mute and using that hand raise feature is great too as well. There's also those like green check marks and red X's for yes and no if you're asking a closed-ended question. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with Zoom, all right? Now, going a little bit further, besides the Zoom software itself, because it's pretty easy to figure out a lot of this stuff. You just have to turn it on in your Zoom settings and, you know, have whatever level of the Zoom package pays for it. I'm not a Zoom pricing expert, so I'm not sure like what you'd have to buy to do those things. It's all on their website, I'm sure. I think the biggest thing for me that has taken like my Zoom meetings from like, you know, just your basic run-of-the-mill Zoom meeting to like a much better experience is investing in the equipment that you're actually using to do this, right? We all got to remember that like we're going to be doing business this way for a long time, okay? And you know, your built-in webcam on your PC or your MacBook only takes you so far, you know? And, you know, generally the lighting's not that great. It looks too grainy. The audio is usually not great. I myself invested in a couple of things that I would kind of recommend anyone to invest in if you're going to be doing a lot of meetings this way. The first one was like a decent microphone. So you may notice my audio sounds pretty good right now. That's because I'm using this thing. This is a microphone by Blue. It's called a Yeti. So it's a Blue Yeti. This is a great mic that you can get. I think it's like $150 or something like that. They're pretty common. You can find them on Amazon. And then the other thing too is invest in a good webcam, right? So right now you're looking at me through my Canon EOS 80D. So I have like a full DSLR camera set up right here using this thing called an Elgato Cam Link. This is a $1,200 camera. So I wouldn't recommend anyone go out and buy a $1,200 camera. What I would recommend that you do is get something like this. So this guy right here, I'll adjust my, sorry, my dog's barking in the background. So this right here is a Logitech C920. I can't get it in focus, but yeah, Logitech C920. This is a really, really good step up from a webcam that you would have like, you know, if you're talking about like the built-in webcam on a MacBook or your PC or something like that. So like definitely invest in something that's going to make your video quality better, your mic better. Lighting's also really good as well. I don't have any sort of like professional lighting going on right here. If I were to just switch and kind of show you my little setup I have right here. So I'm going to switch to my webcam. I just have a basic lamp, right? And that lamp is casting enough light up onto the ceiling that it gives me like a pretty decent lighting effect over here. And it's pretty easy to see, right? That didn't cost me anything. That was just a standing lamp that I had. So little stuff like that's definitely helpful.
I spent some time earlier today trying to modify my setup as well. How's my audio coming in?
Good, actually.
Good?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I'm using a pretty decent little microphone.
Nice.
Setup
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
so.
I could tell.
Now, what type of mics are these? Are these boom microphones?
So you can pretty much any good mic that you get, you can like, here, I'll show it to you at the bottom. They usually have these little connectors right here. I don't know what the name of the standard is, but pretty much any sort of like boom that you get for a microphone has these like basic standardized like connectors at the bottom. So you can set it up however you want. I just use the base that's right here. And this is good because it's like rubber at the bottom. If I like pound my desk, like it doesn't come through all the time. And I get very animated when I'm doing my trainings. It doesn't come through all the time because it's, you know, it's got the rubber there. But it's great. I can like move it around, slide it around. I just have these like curved edges on my desk. So I had a like kind of a crappy boom that came with this. And I just don't use it because the stand is just as good. Yeah.
Yeah, this is my first time testing out this setup. So
what mic is that?
This is a Sterling Audio ST59.
Oh, nice. Okay, so that's a good one. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. These headphones came with this set that I got, and they're terrible. I hate them. They literally hurt my ears if I wear them for too long. But yeah. So let's get back to the technology thing. So besides like having good hardware and having like a good, you know, mic right here, The other thing that I have, and I got to show it to you, is this little green screen right here, right?
Nice.
So this is a green screen by the same company that makes the connector for my camera to go into my computer. It's by a company called Elgato. They make a lot of cool like streaming stuff for like video game streamers, but all that stuff is also great if you're doing a lot of Zoom meetings or Zoom trainings. It's basically a green screen that folds up and down. So like I can have a much nicer background like I have with this one. I typically put my company's logo in the background when I'm doing trainings, things like that, but you can do whatever you want. Have fun with it. Like Zoom meetings should be fun. They shouldn't be overly formal, right? Because we're all living in a very different world than we were before. So like all this like human interaction that we have, like even if it is on a professional level, like we need to find a little bit of fun in it. Otherwise we're going to drive ourselves crazy. I know it's a little bit tougher when you're working in the law space, but like, you know, no matter what, you're working with humans. And the thing is if you can be the more comfortable you can get on a Zoom meeting, the more productive you're going to be. Right. And like on that last note, being comfortable, if you're going to be learning for an extended period of time, like maybe you're going through, you know, a law class or a law certification or a law course, studying for tests, whatever it may be, if you're going to be doing a lot of like virtual meetings, virtual learning like this, or even if you're going to be facilitating it, you need to create like a comfortable space for yourself, right? I got this big cozy chair. I've got this like desk that goes up and down, like it moves. I can.
So do you have a standing desk?
Yeah, I got a standing desk. See how it's going up and I'm staying? Yeah. So this is a little standing desk. I got this on Amazon. It was like $200. It's great. It's like one of the highest rated one on Amazon is not that expensive at all, right? It's great. Super easy to set up. I've also got, I think, let me just show you real quick. Camera place.
Up the background that you have, is that through like, could you just have Microsoft PowerPoint connected to the screen?
No, this is a feature inside of Zoom. So when you're showing your screen, you guys can actually probably do it too. If you go to where you have your video, and you hit where it says stop video, you can hit choose virtual background. And here's the thing, it works even if you don't have a green screen, right? But if you do have a green screen, it's just that much clearer, right?
Right.
Yeah. And this is just like a nice way to have fun with it. You know what I mean? And sometimes like your background in your office isn't always like the best, you know.
Well, you know, and you don't want to be worried about lighting and angles and what the view is.
Totally.
And that goes to being comfortable too. You're organized. You're ready to go. Like 100%. For instance, you know, even as little as connecting your desktop with your monitor.
Yeah.
You know, making sure everything is lined up so that you can, you know, because if I really want to look at my monitor, you guys are getting a side view.
Exactly.
Giving you the eye contact that you deserve.
Yeah, totally. Right. So like so for example, with me, sometimes, I don't do this all the time, but like sometimes when I'm going to do like an instructor-led training and I'm reading off of a deck, right? Instead of me looking sideways like this, what I'll do is I'll switch over to my other camera here. So I'm looking more at the screen and more at the person this way. But at this time, I'm looking at my screen right now. And it at least looks like I'm talking to you. Obviously, I wouldn't have this like mattress here. I would be getting that out of the shot, right? But you know, you don't have to have a billion different webcams. One thing that I would recommend, though, even if you get like one of these nice little simple webcams, is invest in a good tripod so you can put that camera wherever you want, and you're not like forced to put it on the not forced to like put it on your monitor, right? Because you can't always get like a great angle. So, for example, this is like what my setup looks like right here. Right? I don't really know if you can see it that well, but I have one of these little Joby Gorilla Pods here. They make them for like every single camera that you can imagine. This is like a big one because it's hooked up to my giant Canon here. But having like a nice little cheap tripod that you can use, and this Logitech one actually came with one too. But just so like you have a little bit more freedom of like where you actually sit your camera, if you want to take it a little more seriously, that's always good too.
For me, as a newly barred attorney, one of the things that I might have to deal with from time to time might be something like taking a video deposition of somebody. So how might I deal with somebody who, you know, doesn't have the green screen with the lovely palm trees right behind you? How might I get a better quality video product out of somebody who maybe doesn't have the best equipment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's the thing. Generally poor video quality. So like, and like, again, whereas you might be someone who's using Zoom a lot more, something like this, where, you know, you want to like present yourself professionally on this end, it's going to be easier for you to like get the green screen, get the lighting, get a good camera, have a good mic and everything. You can't expect someone who like you're deposing to like go out and grab all that equipment and come in it just so you can depose them. Also, like if I misinterpret deposing at all, please let me know. As I told Mike before, I understand the bottom of the ocean better than I do law. So if I say anything weird, please correct me. But let's use that situation where like you're trying to depose someone, maybe they just have a laptop and that's it, right? So they're dealing with, you know, just the little tiny camera that comes with their computer. Maybe they're doing it on their phone even, right? Zoom works across mobile devices as well. The reason like video quality is bad generally is because of poor lighting. Okay. So if you want to like really amp up like the quality of their video for a deposition, you may just need to tell them to like adjust where they're sitting in the room, or if they have some sort of lamp, bring it closer to them, make sure they're speaking clearly into the microphone, which is probably going to be located next to their camera if they're using some sort of, you know, laptop or anything like that. Obviously, if they have some of the equipment, suggest that they use it, right? But you can't really expect that because there's no guarantee that this person is trying to, you know, be a master of doing video conferencing, right? So I'd say the best thing you can do is try to focus on lighting. And that could be done with either like if it's lights up in the wall, maybe they sit in a different position in the room, right? If they can move around a lamp, move around a lamp. Mm-hmm. One, like if you want to get like a little bit more technical, if you have a lamp that can diffuse light up into the ceiling and then have it bounce back, it's a bit softer. It's way better than them like pointing a desk lamp at their face, right? That's going to blow everything up. So if you have a well-lit room, right, that's generally going to make the quality of the video, even on a much lower quality camera, be seen a whole lot better, right? So that's probably the best advice I can give you there. If you don't have any like good equipment to work with, focus on the lighting, make sure there isn't a bunch of background noise. That'll give you the best audio possible. And just make sure they're comfortable like using the Zoom software. Okay. Like it's pressure enough that they're doing a deposition, right? But then having to also operate a piece of technology that maybe they've never seen before, you want to make sure they're like comfortable navigating it and using it. So it's upon you as someone who's going to be like a steward and really understand this whole Zoom software to get really familiar with it and get really good at explaining it to people for the first time, right? And getting script down as you do it, so it's not a hindrance in any of the like the law work that you'd be doing. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I think that gives some really great foundational sort of things. Just, I mean, really some pointers for folks who might not be as familiar with this technology, most likely because they haven't had experience with it. They haven't had to have experience with it.
Yeah.
So I think that being able to, I think that you made a really great point when you said being a steward and showing people how to use it, as opposed to just expecting that they know it.
Yep. Yeah.
So Max, on a deposition, one of the first things we'll do with the deponent is we'll run through a list of ground rules. Like we're here taking your testimony. Do you understand you're under oath? If you don't understand a question, then please let me know. Otherwise, if you answer a question, I'll assume you understand the question.
Yep.
I wonder if in this new environment, if you can think of some good rules that maybe you utilize with your training classes. So yeah. I know you just wrapped up a big training class this week. We touched base getting ready for this episode. And you mentioned that you were really busy with a training class. So what types of rules might be helpful, even if it's not in a deposition, but we're going to go on a big conference call for work. So what types of rules do you like to set forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So big one for me is like, turn your video on, right? Like if you're not going to have your video on, like this could have been a phone call and why are we going through all these extra steps, right? So like, I definitely suggest that everyone turns their video on. Sometimes people might be like, oh, well, why do you want to see me, right? And sometimes it's like awkward to answer that question because you don't want to just say, well, I'm doing it, so I want you to do it, right? There's a certain level of just like human connection and personality that just doesn't come through unless you have your video playing. Right? So if you're in a group setting, if you're doing like a larger video conference, definitely like saying, hey, the expectation is that you'll have your camera on just so we know that like you're present, you're here and you're listening. If you do need to step away, which is totally fine, because we need to remember, like, and let me just do a little aside here, right? And this is great if you're doing a meeting. This is also great if you're doing a training and teaching people. People aren't working at home by choice right now, right? They're not like a fully remote employee that's used to doing this and used to blocking out time to like sit here and just be on Zooms all day, right? They have other things they need to do because like the rest of their family is there with them, right? So they may have to go stop the dog from chewing on something. They may have to go take care of the kid. They may have to be caring for a family member, whatever it is. So like another ground rule that like is besides that, you know, yeah, turn your camera off, and that kind of signifies to us that you need to step away. The ground rules for like the people organizing these meetings is to have empathy for that, right? There's so much more going on in people's homes that is going to take them away from either paying attention or fully participating in a meeting. And you can't hold that against them because it's not the same environment that we're used to with virtual meetings, right? So that's a couple things. The other thing too is like if it's a larger group of people and you are doing a meeting type thing, like a web conference, put yourself on mute, right? And if you need to speak, then take yourself off mute. Sometimes it's hard for you to hear a lot of the background noise that your microphone is actually picking up, and everybody on Zoom can hear it, right? So generally try to come to a consensus on like if you're going to be on mute or if you're not. Let the group decide that. If you're all in quiet environments, it's okay to keep yourself off mute. That's also like has its benefits too, to keep everyone else off mute, because then people are more willing to like participate and talk and be part of the discussion versus feeling they have this like, wall in front of them. It's going to stop them from participating. Right. In terms of like other ground rules that like I always set is like, stop me if you have a question, right? Sometimes folks are very, very scared to interrupt a meeting or interrupt a presentation just because it's happening virtually. Right? So you need to try to eliminate as many of those barriers as possible to make sure that your conferences are actually conferences and your discussions are actually discussions versus just someone being a talking head and no one adding anything or participating in the discussion itself. Right. So, for me, I often will tell people like, don't be afraid to interrupt me at any time. Like, in fact, I encourage it. Like, otherwise people are going to try to stay silent. In terms of other ground rules, going back to like what you said, and I don't really know if this is like so much a ground rule, but it's a great way to set ground rules, is whenever I have training starting, we typically, like when people are joining the meeting at the beginning, we'll typically have a slide that's just for everybody to read as they're joining that lays down the ground rules, right? We'll say, turn on your video, take yourself off of mute, say hi in the chat to let us know you're here, right? Put a green check mark when you're ready to go. So if there are any other ground rules there, having a nice welcome slide that people see as they join the meeting to get everybody on the same page is a great way to deliver those different ground rules that you have. But, I think everyone else is going to kind of have their preference on how casual meetings are, how professional meetings are. Like that all depends with like who you're meeting with and what the scenario is. I'd say just, bring the human into it. Like we're all craving human interaction, social interaction right now. And we need to be able to get that at every opportunity that we have, even in some more formal settings. Right. So just don't take yourself too seriously, I think is another like big thing. Like have fun with it, have a cool background, whatever it is, but just make sure like it's not robotic, I guess is the easiest way to put a button on that one.
I think that that you raised some interesting thoughts during that last answer about why couldn't we just have a phone call if we didn't need the video? Is this the right method for communication? I think if you could speak to the modes of communication that you'll utilize, I think that would be helpful. So you've got not only Zoom, but presumably you've got your email, you have your chat functions, you have your phone. How do you kind of divide or dedicate what mode to what when it comes time for the actual work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, let me break it down. Let me maybe put it in the context of like training, right? Because we make a lot of decisions around this. So when we're trying to make the decision on if we're communicating like we have to think about like what we're communicating, right? Oftentimes what we're doing is we're transferring knowledge, right? And that's a form of communication. So like what we've found is doing very technical hands-on walkthroughs of software is often not the best use of a Zoom meeting, right? Any sort of like crazy hands-on work that requires someone to like do something while someone's telling them how to do it, we always find that some sort of asynchronous way of delivering that training is the best way to do it, right? So we build a lot of e-learnings that someone can take self-paced and do that on their own, right? A good example of that is like, you know, could this be a Zoom meeting? Could it be a phone call, or could it be an email, right? I always ask myself that when I'm like trying to communicate with people. The other thing that we do too, besides email, and I don't know how often this is used in the law world, is we use a tool called Slack. Have you guys used Slack before?
New for me, Max.
All right, cool. So Slack is like instant messenger for business, right? So it allows like your team to collaborate on different projects as if you were like talking to each other on AOL Instant Messenger, if we remember that from back in the day, right? But it lets you organize all these conversations into different channels, and you can do direct messages with multiple people, and you can share files, and you can do all these crazy things. It has a bunch of software integrations. You can totally customize it. It's one of the greatest instant messaging tools for business, like bar none, right? So for example, you could have little channels where people could ask certain questions, right? So like if your law firm had a Slack, if they were using Slack, right? They could have a room where people can go and ask questions about paperwork, or people can go and ask questions about scheduling time with attorney. I don't know how the inside of a law office works, right? But like all these different parts of the business could have their own different channels where people could go ask certain questions about certain things and keep those like conversations organized. So Slack is a really great tool. And if anyone out there watching this isn't using Slack and you have a business, download and use Slack. It is like one of the best things, you know, you could ever use. It will eventually replace email, I am sure. But I think when it comes to email is a great way to set up your Zoom meetings as well, right? So if I have a training coming up or pre-work that people need to do for a meeting, I'll typically send that out with email first. Calendar invites are also a great way to communicate, even though they may not seem as obvious, right? The cool thing about calendar invites is no matter what sort of calendar program you're using, whether it's Google Calendar, Office 365, Apple Calendar, you name it, any calendar program uses the same type of files for those calendar events. That's why anyone can send you a calendar invite and it'll work in whatever calendar program that you're working in. One of the best things that I do, especially if I'm setting up a series of trainings, is I use the description of the calendar event to have everything that anybody would need to be either prepared for that meeting or to be prepared for that training, such as a link to the Zoom, a link to download any documents that are pertinent or any pre-work that they need to do, or any additional resources that I'm going to talk about in that meeting or in that class, right? So calendar events is often one that like people sleep on a whole bunch, but like it's great because you need to think about it. In today's world where everybody is totally isolated and on their own, they're living and dying by their digital calendars more than they ever have in their entire life, because their Zoom meeting links are in there, their schedule's in there. They need to know when they need to be at their computer and when they can block off time to be away from it. So the calendar apps, I feel like, are going to start to be like a much bigger platform for communication than they've been before. But people often they just like skip over it. Like all they send over in a calendar event is like who's meeting, and like that's it, right? They don't like add any context to it that helps deliver the right information where people are actually looking, right? So I think calendar events are huge. To be totally honest with you guys, I don't know the last time I was on like just a phone call for business, right? We use Zoom for like literally everything. It's just a much more personal way to like connect with people these days. And I don't even have a phone at my desk, which is like crazy. I've got my cell phone, but like that's basically it. I don't have a desk phone at HubSpot, right? And I think like it's easy for me to say this because I work in the tech space and the software space. And I know a lot of like other verticals and industries out there are taking a little bit more time to catch up to it. But the thing is, and it's funny because I talk to my customers about this all the time. The thing is like the new generation, like you guys, getting into these spaces, which classically have been a little more dragging on the technology side of things. You guys all grew up through the age of Google and Facebook and MySpace and Zoom and like all of this stuff. And you guys are going to be the ones that totally take law out of the Stone Ages when it comes to technology and the way that people communicate with each other, right? Because it's been a very classical kind of set in stone way of how people communicate. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think this is going to change a lot, especially now that everybody's getting thrown into the same ring of we're all working remotely now, so we all need to learn how to use this stuff, right? I know I dragged on a little bit there, but it's kind of how I think of it.
I would say one question that I have as a new prospective hire at a law firm: what can employers do to set people like me up who are perhaps more familiar with these technologies and are going to be implemented at greater rates?
Yep.
What can employers do to set new employees, new hires like me up for success?
That's a great question. I think that all starts with really nailing down the tech stack that the company's actually using. So when you go to deploy this stuff to your new hires, especially since they're not coming into your office anymore, you need to make it dead simple for them to open up a computer and have everything on it that they need, right? And like, I honestly think one of like the best places to start is what you use for like your calendar and your email, right? Because when it comes to like working together, what do you have to do? You have to create documents and you have to communicate with each other, right? So if you're a law firm out there and you're not already on something like Office 365 or Google, like business apps, you need to move there immediately, because this is like by far the best tools that you have to be able to communicate and collaborate and create like content and send stuff back and forth to each other. That's table stakes. Now, the reason that makes it a little bit easier for your new hires is because as long as you can like send them an email saying, this is your email address for our company that you're going to use, and this is your password, all you need to do is send them whatever computer that they want. They open up Google Chrome or whatever and just log in, and then they have access to all the stuff that they need, right? So one, make it super easy. Like, we are blessed here at HubSpot that we have like an amazing IT team that works around the clock to image all of our computers, get all the software they need on it, and send it out to everybody. Not every business like has the luxury of doing that. But what you can do, like, everyone can buy a computer and anyone can go set up Google business apps, right? And if not, you can hire someone to help you do that. But I think that's like one of the easiest things. Simplify the tech stack that you use. So when you send them the computer, they unwrap it, they open it up, they log in, and they have access to everything. And then provide them with some sort of guide to help get them set up with the rest of the stuff that they need. So for example, what we did for our new hires is we created an e-learning that they were able to access via email before they even got any of their stuff, that explained all the different collaboration tools that we had. So it showed them how to use this thing called the wiki, which is like our internal database of all of our internal knowledge about HubSpot and everything that has to do with HubSpot. That's by a company called Atlassian. Atlassian makes this wiki. It's called Confluence is the name of the software. It's basically, just think of like a Wikipedia page for your company that everyone can like add stuff to, and it's internal, right? So we show them how to use that. We also give them a video explanation of how to use Slack. So how to download that, how to get set up with it, how it works, so they know how to like chat and collaborate with people. On top of that, we also show them how to use Zoom. So if it's their first time using Zoom, they have a little video explaining it to them. So any sort of materials that you can provide, whether you email it to their personal email before they get all their stuff, or like it's waiting for them in their work email when they first access it, you got to make sure they're comfortable using the digital collaboration tools that you have. Otherwise, it's going to be a very rocky start starting a career at your company, right? It's hard enough as it is starting a new job. And then you got to think about starting that job remotely when you've never worked remote in your entire life. Then you got to add the pressure of learning a whole bunch of new software, add the pressure of getting to know all your new colleagues, add the pressure of trying to perform. Oh, and by the way, the world is ending outside. So there's so much compounding stress that you need to make it as easy as possible for people to just get going. And that all starts with having a very simple tech stack that doesn't take a whole lot to maintain and is easy to get people enrolled in. All right. You know, if you have an IT team, right, you can start talking about mobile device management software that has all that stuff on the computer, like as they get it, right? But you don't need to go that crazy just to make sure people have the basics in their setup, right? Sometimes too, people are going to have their computers already. Maybe you're not sending a computer to someone. If you give them access to a Google account and tell them what their password is, they can log in and get all their stuff, right? And what's cool about using Google, like as your business communication platform, is a lot of different apps out there that people are using, like Zoom, like Slack, you know, like any of these other like business apps that have exploded over the past like 10 years. Oftentimes they let you use Google to sign into them. So it can act as like your single sign-on authentication, security, blah, 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 all that stuff that I don't understand, right? And make it very easy for your employees to access the apps that they need. So I'd say simplify it as much as you can, but give them the context that they need and don't assume they know how to do all this stuff. Just because they're young and out of college doesn't mean they know how to use Slack or know how to use Zoom or know how to use a wiki or anything like that, right? Never assume. That's the biggest thing. Make sure they have the context and support them.
Awesome. Just real quick, you used this word tech stack a couple times. I was wondering if you could define that for us.
Yeah. So when I say tech stack, that basically just means the collection of software that you use to run your business, right? So like at HubSpot, we use Google for our email, for our calendar, and we use Google business apps, so like Google Docs, slides, and sheets, right? So we can make presentations, we can write documents, and we can do a bunch of math on spreadsheets, right? We use Slack to communicate with each other. We use tools like Canva to do a lot of like digital like design work. We obviously use HubSpot because we build HubSpot and HubSpot's our business. So we use that internally. So a tech stack just means what software are you using to run your business and what are the common things that your employees are using to collaborate with each other.
And I feel like we'd be missing an opportunity as the e-discovery, iGovernance, and cybersecurity section to ask what sort of recommendations do you have to keep everything secure? We've heard about this thing called Zoom bombing now. Luckily, we haven't had anybody pop in and Zoom bomb us yet. But what are some ways that you can protect yourself, that you can remain secure using these technologies?
Yeah. So not being like a security expert by any means, let's keep it focused on Zoom because I think that's like the most immediate thing that people need to know right now. Password protect your Zooms and use the waiting room feature, okay? So when you're building your Zoom meetings, or if you have a personal Zoom link, you can add a password in there, okay? So what that'll do is if anyone just, the reason people are Zoom bombing right now is either they see someone's Zoom ID somewhere and they just randomly join it. I think that just happened in London or something like that. Like Parliament was doing like a Zoom thing and someone Zoom bombed. It could have been something like that. Or if someone gets a hold of like your personal link or something like that. But a lot of those trolls that are on there are just typing in random meeting IDs and just kind of popping in and seeing what works, right? They literally have nothing better to do, okay? So the way to like stop this is you password protect your meetings. Now, what'll happen there is like you can choose the password that people put in to get into certain meetings, but if you send them the link, it'll have this little hash at the end that actually has the password included. So if you share the link directly with someone, they don't have to put the password in. But if someone knows your meeting ID and just punches in the meeting ID, it'll ask them for a password, then they're screwed and they can't Zoom bomb you, right? This one's password protected. That's one thing. Another feature is the waiting room. So you can turn on this waiting room feature in Zoom. So like you only let people into the room when you know exactly who's trying to join. So that's a good one. Also, you can turn on a setting that doesn't allow people to join once they've been kicked out or removed, as they call it. So if someone does make their way in somehow and they're causing a whole bunch of chaos, you can remove them and they can't get back in, right? So there's a number of different things. I'd say the biggest thing is password protect your meetings. That's one of the better things that you can do. Yeah. And, okay, one other thing. Single sign-on is big, as well as two-factor authentication. If you don't know what two-factor authentication is, and this is something to talk to your IT guys about, okay? If you've ever logged into some piece of software and it asks you to punch in a code from your cell phone, that is two-factor authentication because you're trying to log in and that system is trying to say, well, we'll definitely know it's you if we text your cell phone and you punch in the number that we give you. All right, that's two-factor authentication. We use an app here called Duo. And what Duo does is when we try to log into like one of our apps that has this two-factor authentication, it sends like a little push notification to my watch or my phone. I hit the button approve and it just lets me in, right? Because it knows that like if it wasn't truly me, I wouldn't have been able to get into this other secure device to actually confirm that it was me, right? So two-factor authentication is definitely huge. If you are a law firm, and this is me going back to my Apple days. So before I worked at HubSpot, I was a business specialist at Apple, and I sold, hardware and software and advised companies, a lot of law firms, on how to like deploy and secure their mobile devices if they were using like Apple or iPhone or whatever it may be. And again, this would be for like the most basic thing you can do is put passwords on all of your devices. That's kind of table stakes. But if you have some sort of IT team and you're managing a larger amount of technology, maybe you're a larger law firm or a law school or like whatever it may be, talk to your IT team about mobile device management and things like the Apple Deployment Program and Apple Business Manager. These are all tools that help keep your devices a lot more secure and make it easier for you to deploy them at scale. So going back to your question about how do you make sure your employees are set up for success, that can help you with that end of the spectrum too. A lot of those mobile device management softwares, those are always like third party to Apple, and they often work on Apple devices and Windows, Android, and like any other device that you can think about too. So you can allow your employees to use whatever devices they want while still staying secure. Right. But I'd say the basic thing is think about two-factor authentication, password protect your meetings, put passwords on all your devices. That's like the basic stuff.
Solid advice, Max.
Yeah.
Hey, well, I really appreciate all your time, man. I don't know how you're doing. We've been going almost an hour. Just wanted to check in.
I'm fine. I'm chilling.
Yeah, this is great, man.
We can keep going as long as you want.
I really liked your point about making calendar invitations as useful as possible.
Mm-hmm.
If we need to review a document that, everything you need before the teleconference. I'm not a big, I like to do agendas in certain settings, especially when I'm first meeting a client.
Mm-hmm.
But to the extent you're doing an agenda, really it should be in your calendar invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing. If you're doing like a first call with a client and you're doing it over Zoom, if you had some little tutorial on this is what you follow, if this is your first time getting on Zoom, you can put that in a calendar event, right? So it's like they get the calendar event, you write at the top, we're going to use this thing called Zoom to talk to each other. Have you never used Zoom before? Here's a link that shows you how to download it and use it, right? That way it's not a barrier when you're getting on the phone with that person for the first time. Again, you don't want to assume anything, right? So set your new hires up for success, set your clients up for success. Keep it simple.
Absolutely.
Cool.
How are you guys making it through staying sheltered in out there?
So I can tell you from the HubSpot perspective, and this is actually great for any company out there. We make a very intentional effort to stay connected as best we can for things that have nothing to do with work. All right. So for example, at the end of each day, we do a Zoom happy hour where we just get together and like hang out, right? You got to remember, like you're not seeing a whole bunch of your friends right now, right? So social interaction is super important. I can tell you right now, our team is closer than it's ever been, even when we were in the office, right? There's something that happened like during this whole, coronavirus scare and us working completely remotely that has brought us together in a way that like has never happened before. So like, if you don't think that's possible, even if you're in an overly professional environment, I really, really implore you to do something like that. So we do happy hours at the end of the day, and every Friday we do some sort of like all company entertainment, right? So for example, we had the guy who did the podcast on Tiger King came and did a Q&A for us over Zoom. My buddy Ryan Panett, who's one of the trainers for our customer success team, he's also in a Tom Petty cover band. He played Tom Petty, music over Zoom for the entire company. So we had like 1,000 people joining this, not 1,000, we had like 400 people joining this Zoom meeting, just watching Ryan play a whole bunch of Tom Petty music. I think next week we're going to have one of our trainers do a bartending class on Friday, right? So like there's so many different things that you can do over Zoom to stay connected with each other. Then it like makes it not that bad, honestly. Like and it's weird to say it, you will get closer to your colleagues more than ever if you make intentional time to use this, and use this tool for more than just meetings. Okay, Zoom is a totally different tool than it's been used before, right? I even use it to talk to my therapist, right? So like you can use it for so many different things besides work. Don't pigeonhole Zoom into just being like a professional use tool only.
We were at Temple last night via Zoom.
Nice.
So we got a Zoom invitation. So we were at Indianapolis Hebrew congregation. I did turn my camera off.
Yeah.
But I think next week we'll turn our camera on.
Absolutely.
We're ready for, I was going to have to do a bear hug on Jacob so he'd stop jumping on me. I didn't want people to judge me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of judgment these days. You got to be careful.
But that's the thing. Like we've got to get over the stigma of looking a certain way on Zoom, because work is home and home is work now, and like our personal lives are completely interjected, if not on top of our professional lives now. And like, we can't stop that from we can't let that stop us from like not only getting great work done, but like we can't let work stop us from being good caregivers and like stewards of our family here. Right. So, I think people need to be a lot more accepting that the professionalism on Zoom is going to take a bit of a hit to make a little bit more room for the humanity, right? And like everyone needs to be tolerant of that. Obviously, there's certain situations where you don't want your kids running around in the background, but like if you're going to be that person that's going to be in like a work meeting and you see someone's like kid come up to them and give them a hug, or try to see what they're doing, or you see their dog in the background, or maybe like they're not wearing them like a suit and tie, don't be that guy that gives them, guff for that, right? Like you got to remember it's such a different environment than it wasn't before. We don't have the same flexibility that we had to, be totally professional in one realm and like come back and like be ourselves here. Everything is totally mixed up, right? So everyone needs to apply a little bit more empathy and just be okay with sacrificing a little bit of professionalism to make room for the humanity and just let us all be a little more connected. Yeah.
It's because everything's inextricably intertwined these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like to disconnect.
Totally.
Gotta make time to
I just got a text right now from our trainers wanting to do a Zoom power hour, just hang out, right? Like that. We're more connected than we've ever been. It's nuts. And like, I'm hearing from my colleagues on the weekend, which has never happened before, So yeah.
I've been following an attorney who does little updates via Twitch. And
nice.
One of the things that he says that he does with his fellow partners at their law firm is they'll jump on Zoom and they'll do a digital happy hour just to check in, just to see each other, because like Max mentioned earlier, just being able to see people that you haven't seen you physically seen for weeks at a time can do different really good things for the psyche.
Yeah, and to build off of that point, and like Twitch is a great way to do this. But everyone needs to use this wonderful thing that we have here called Zoom, which lets us be anywhere in the planet at any time, to do a little bit of good and help each other out, right? I've been doing a ton of work helping other companies figure out how to take their on-site employee onboarding and go completely digital because we did good at it. I don't get paid for that, right? I'm sharing my knowledge and helping people out because like it's the right thing to do now and we all need to do it. I go on LinkedIn and I see like HubSpot partners basically putting it out on HubSpot partners are like agencies that you can pay to do HubSpot work, for anyone who doesn't know what a partner is. But they're going out and saying like, hey, we're going to give 5 free hours of consulting to anyone who needs it. Right? They're not making any money off of that. And that's something that people would pay $1,000 to $2,000 for, right? We're all in such a big opportunity to help each other out here. And I think companies are as well, to make sure that like not only our employees, but our customers and all the people we rely on in our ecosystems come out whole on the other end. I mean, this is somewhat related, but like for any businesses watching this, profit is not the goal right now. The goal is to keep the world around so you can make profit after. All right. So you need to do everything right now, not to like come up with a, just like a cheesy way to market yourself and take advantage of the whole COVID-19 thing. It's not that. You need to like do good in the world to make sure that your employees and your customers, the people you rely on, the people that grow your business, the people that grow your firm and make it run, are there on the other side, as well as any of your competitors that keep your vertical or your industry interesting. And, you know, like, there's just so much we should all be doing to help each other out right now. And we have this wonderful tool called Zoom to be able to do that in a way that we've never been able to do it before. The question is like, who are going to be those people that do good versus take advantage of this situation, right? And I would implore as many of you as possible to be on that side of doing good and not just trying to make money off of this, right? The money will come after when things get back to normal, right? But things are never going to get back to normal if we don't all take it upon ourselves to like help other people, share experience, share knowledge. The stuff that you guys are doing, like creating all this like law content and everything, like that's going to help other lawyers, which is great. You know what I mean? And we all should be doing some form of that. We all have expertise that we can share, and there's no excuse, there's no barrier to do it anymore.
Much love to that, Max.
Yeah.
What we do now to help people will be remembered in the long run.
Absolutely.
And how we stick together and make it through this time period is going to just be a story to tell in the future when things are better and we make it through these tough times.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
I'd like to have another episode, obviously, as your schedule allows.
I'm down whenever.
I love it.
I don't got a whole lot on my plate right now. I don't think
I actually saw you guys are hiring. I saw some openings. You still opening up classes?
HubSpot's always hiring. Yeah, we got 50 people coming in Monday.
Excellent.
Well, not coming in, sitting down and tuning in Monday.
Remotely.
Yeah. Yep. You got it.
Well,
yeah.
love you, Max. We are really grateful for your time. We look forward to future connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can talk about inbound marketing in the law space at some time. When I was an implementation specialist, I had many law firms and law tech and like law related clients. And while I am no law expert myself, a lot of the methodologies behind inbound apply to like literally any type of business, and like law is no different. So there's probably a pretty good conversation we can have with like how law firms or law companies can market themselves, because there's a lot of science behind it.
We've got our next topic, our topic for our next episode.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Love it.
I saw your video on deals, and I was thinking the same thing. There's a lot of crossover or lessons learned.
Sure.
So we'll look forward to learning more from your experiences and connecting as well. And hopefully we'll be able to see some basketball in the summer, maybe.
Hopefully.
I
said on LinkedIn, I think Twitch, the NBA, like NBA 2K and 2K games, like they have and literally all the other sports leagues have such a huge opportunity here to like take those video game titles and play out the regular season using the AI and hosting it all on Twitch, because I think that would be a great service that they could do for the sports community right now. So I don't know if anyone in the NBA or the NFL or MLB is watching this, partner with Twitch.
Maybe some Pacers will be tuned in.
Yep.
And some Celtics.
Totally.
All right, love you, Max.
Cool.
All right.
Michael, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Max. This was awesome.
Absolutely. That was super fun.
Next episode for sure.
Yeah, I can't wait for the next one.
We'll have a good follow-up.
Cool.